Oh boy, what are we still doing here, really? I mean, it's at this point where we know with such certainty that something like this is absolutely not going to happen for Deep Rock. I think certain things like with more overclocks and the perk rework and new biomes and things like, yeah, sure, but no new actual additions. Like the perk thing, I feel like it will happen, but it's going to be more low key than people are expecting. I think it's going to be good. It's going to be more along the lines of adjustments. We're not really going to get any new systems, and I would say adding overclocks to things that don't already have overclocks is absolutely adding onto a pre-existing system with another one. I guess it's like a subsystem almost. I think the biggest change that we're going to see for Deep Rock itself from here on out is going to be the perk thing, and even then, I don't think that's going to be huge. It's just going to be the most impactful thing they're going to do from here on out, because just the case with road core being a thing. So much more of their effort in terms of creating new systems is going to go into that, because that's what it's like constructing a new game from the ground up. It's so much easier to add things, and with Deep Rock getting as complex and as dense as it is from a technical perspective, it's just getting harder and harder to add things to that. It's so easy for me to see why their passion is in road core at the moment, because Deep Rock was probably just burning them out, both in terms of it's not just the response recently, as well as the fact that it's probably just getting harder and harder to work on. It is so rational, understandable even, for them to be getting burnt out with Deep Rock and want to take a break from it. So it kind of sucks for Deep Rock itself, but it actually might not. They were probably just going to keep going and get really burnt out, and the seasons were just going to get worse and worse. I think season 5 is actually going to be probably the highest quality season, and I reckon in terms of size, it's going to be probably a little bit bigger than season 3 as well. Definitely not season 1, but probably not small either. So I think there's stuff to look forward to there. Either way, so what does this mean for this series? But I'm sort of just going to write it out. We're on the final 4, the ones that the grenades that they added in season 3. So I'm just going to write this out to the end and sort of try and come up with the best things I can that can somehow be sort of translated into the game. We have these maintenance updates upcoming, which will include balance changes, and I think there are some, possibly even in this video, that could be balancing of sorts. Although grenade balancing is clearly not a priority, and I think that's absolutely understandable. I actually don't think any of them are too underpowered. I think Driller still obviously has a problem, and I think the lures still need to be buffed. But apart from that, like the Driller thing is almost unfixable, and the lures could get buffed. The lures, in my opinion, even need to... It's not even necessarily increase capacity, they just need to actually kill things to be able to make up for everything else that they lack. The fact that they can't kill things. Shredders, on the other hand, the SSG, or the Shredder Swarm Grenade, is of course pretty up there in terms of power when it comes to grenades. So what can we really do with it? Well, I'm not going to be trying to buff it or anything, because that would be absurd. I mean, that's what the clean one suggests, so I want to take a look at that now, actually. So it implies bigger batteries. It was going to be increased shredder lifetime and damage cap. If people don't understand how shredders work, they have a damage cap that they have to reach. And if they reach that before their lifetime runs out, they'll just drop dead anyway. And I think, personally, that there is maybe this concept that's on screen right now could be translated into some kind of quality of life change for the shredders. Not that they aren't really strong, but maybe, just maybe, increasing their lifetime wouldn't actually have too much of an effect, especially given the existence of the damage cap. And I guess in a sense that would mean I should remove the damage cap sort of mentions here. Also, apologies for all this crap. I mean, this is just, this is just PowerPoint, What am I going to do? It says they'll last longer now. As an added bonus, they'll also last longer because, the more damage they can deal, the longer they can last, as long as they're not dealing damage. But yeah, I genuinely think, and by the way, if you had to nerf the Shredders slightly in some other way, I've balanced this out, as a simple balance change to the default Shredder grenade, I would say increasing how long they last would actually be very valid. It's probably the only thing that they don't have is ability to last a really long time. They don't entirely sell the idea of you deploying like a group of small allied robots, basically. So I do think increasing the lifetime could actually be somehow a reasonable buff for them. Even then, you would probably have to nerf something else. I would say the damage cap could be a decent thing to nerf, or possibly just their general speed and ferocity to balance out the fact that they're going to be around for longer. Maybe make them less efficient at killing things quickly. Yeah, there's not much more to it. Obviously, this one really rides on a different sort of scenario for the game going forward, and it's one that we are almost basically guaranteed not to get now. And obviously, the Shredder doesn't need any straight up buffs, except I think maybe lifetime could be something. That's all it is, really. So I see no reason to waste time on this. I actually think the other ideas that I came up with, the balanced and the unstable overclock, are actually interesting enough to sort of be translated into some kind of, not new grenades, but actual genuine features for the Shredder. So we have War Party, drastically increased carry amount, and you can use multiple of them at once. So basically the idea here is you can throw out one Shredder at a time, and you can have as many of them out as you want at a time. And yeah, it's a very simple idea. It's something that was speculated a lot about when we first saw the Shredders way back when Season 3 was being teased. We weren't sure exactly how they were going to work in this sense. Obviously, it's come to be now that you throw them out. You have 4 in total, and there's 5 Shredders in each. In this case, we're actually adding 20 onto the carried amount, so we'd actually have 24 in total as opposed to just 20, which is not necessary, because what I actually want to do here is translate this as a feature for the Shredders. It would almost be a rework of sorts, but it's sort of like more of an experiment. It's something I'd love to see in an experimental branch, so maintenance updates definitely not. So, it's something we'd have to see much later down the line. And I think to really get the most out of these seasons, especially if we're going to be increasing the wait, obviously we've got a year between season 4 and 5. As absurd as that sounds, I don't think the wait's going to be that long between season 5 and 6, but I still think it's going to be longer than usual. I think we need to take advantage of the experimental branch and do things that are strange. And one strange thing would be converting the Shredder ammo count to the number of Shredders that are actually contained within those grenades, and have it so that you only throw out one at a time. You could possibly still have a cap to how many you can have out at one time. You could probably still keep that at 5 if you wanted to, and if you threw out an extra one, then one of them would drop dead. But this would be interesting for a lot of reasons. First of all, I think just seeing that number for a grenade, seeing 20 carried amount for a grenade would be pretty cool. It'd be pretty interesting. And also just the fact that it would really change up how we use the Shredders. You can make them much more deliberate and much more efficient. You can use them in scenarios with much less enemies and have it be justified. Unfortunately, what that also does is give them an absurd amount of flexibility that they probably don't need. Personally, I think this is a kind of idea that's suited to actually something like Rogue Core, where you would possibly have much more extreme variations of things because they don't carry over into being able to start a game with them. Which obviously means there was a timeline where we could have got something like that if Rogue Core was still going to be a D&D expansion, which, by the way, I think it's obvious, but I don't mind reiterating it, that it's obvious to me that Rogue Core is going to be better than the mode that it was originally going to be. I think that's really obvious because, like I said, DLG is getting infinitely more complex and dense as updates go on, and as time goes on, the software just gets older and harder to work with. It's just the natural evolution of things, and them trying to create a DLC worthy game mode inside of Deep Rock was going to be severely limited by Deep Rock itself, and I think the decision to turn it into its own game was actually completely justified. So whether or not these ideas could actually, in some capacity, apply to Rogue Core is highly interesting. I think there is actually something to consider there. Could I perhaps end up making Overclock workshops for Rogue Core? I don't know, but who knows? Maybe this idea is suited to something like that. I'm not sure. Either way, like I said, I really do find the idea of experimental branches being more of an experiment very interesting. You can honestly do the same actually with the maintenance updates and just sort of switch things out and see how things work. I think those updates need to, we haven't seen what they're going to be yet, but either way, I think they already need to step up sort of the intrigue that they can bring by sort of making more extreme and unorthodox balance changes. Something like this is a good example. An even better example is actually the unstable slap chop, which is basically based on the idea of, it's based on the feature of you being able to, slap the shredders. And it doesn't do anything, obviously, but in this case, it would do something. It would actually send them into this overcharge mode where they would attack quicker. It would increase their current damage cap by 10 to make sure that they deal more damage overall. And then also make them explode. If we want this as a base feature, though, which, let's be honest, that's the only way we're ever going to get something like this, we need to make it so that it sort of sacrifices all of the shredders' current damage and just sends them in and makes them explode. Maybe it uses up the damage that it has in it, but it sort of turns it into a more explosive, in a wider radius, basically. I think that actually could work. So that means I should probably actually put some kind of extra word in, maybe just replace what's said here with something. So this would basically be the description of the feature in like the patch notes. Slapping a shredder will cause it to go into overcharge mode, where it will fly towards the nearest enemy and explode, dealing all the damage it had left to deal. Obviously, that last part would be something they probably wouldn't say. They probably wouldn't actually include mention of the damage cap in patch notes, but I think this actually could work, and wouldn't inherently make the shredders stronger than they are. It would just give them a different purpose. Obviously, this once again does actually run into the problem of the previous one. Even if it doesn't outwardly make them stronger, it definitely does make them more flexible. And the shredders are probably the most flexible grenade, of which you only have 4 to carry. Out of all of those, they are easily the most flexible, I think. The only exception, I guess maybe lead bursters are also up there too, in that category. So yeah. But the idea of slapping the shredders and actually being having combat functionality, I just find really enticing. I think it could be funny, I think it could be satisfying and fun, and useful. And also potentially done in a way that isn't broken or overpowered. Yeah, I think the words I've put there make perfect sense for what I'm trying to convey. So yeah, I think every grenade has potential for sort of interesting changes that can be made to it without sort of breaking the balance. And I think this is one of them. Obviously, on face value, it is probably too strong and too flexible, but I think there's always variations that can be made. Sort of keep things in check. Maybe you can only do this before shredders dealt any damage. Perhaps. That's potentially a thing as well. And I think that's all I've got, really. I don't see any reason to waste your time. If you did like these ideas, then please let me know. Obviously, I'm not too concerned. The series itself isn't doing well, and I think that's just because I understand there's no real interest in this. It makes perfect sense to me. I'm just simply riding out until it's done, and then I'm going to move on to... well, I'm not sure, because, I guess coming up with new Overclock seems a little bit less attractive now, because we know we're never going to get that many. I do think we are going to get new overclocks at some point, even if it's really long away now, or if it's just done over the course of weapon balancing rather than a big dump at once. Either way, we've already done so many weapon overclock ideas, but I can still see myself wanting to do more, and I think I will. Possibly reworks, though. I think reworks actually makes a lot of sense, like sort of weapon balancing propositions is actually very worthwhile in the situation we find ourselves in, where that's something that the weapon, something that the maintenance updates can really be used for is tweaks. I mean, that's something that they put up there, weapon tweaks and balances, which I'm always excited to see because they just interest me. So I think once we're done with the grenade ones, there is going to be a round of sort of reworks and suggestions for all the overclocks. I think I'm going to do it one set of weapons at a time. That'll be engineered primaries, then gunner primaries, driller primaries, and scout primaries, and then the secondaries. So 8 videos, potentially. And that's probably how I'm going to handle it. Either way, I'm done here. If you did enjoy, please make sure to like and subscribe. If you want to stay on top of everything to do with Rock Galactic and Rock Galactic Rogue Core, then please make sure to click the notification bell as well. And that's all. See ya.